The creaking cart rumbled from Kirov, its wheels straining under the weight of Gameon and his rebel crew, Taiho, grinning over his dice. Cleo, her fire room flickering. Victor, the burly mercenary, eyeing the road. Flick, the blue lightning, tense with his sword. And Kai, staff in hand, radiating quiet strength. The Scarlet Moon Empire's shadow loomed as they neared Kalekka, an abandoned town, nowhere near its former glory. Kalekka used to be a town specializing in cotton production. However, after the Kalekka massacre, the town had since been abandoned and completely overran by monsters. The houses have triangular roofs and small windows, similar to those in Kirov, but they remain stained with soot, a lingering reminder of the massacre. Near the northern exit of Kalekka, a middle-aged farmer with a rugged, weathered appearance stood in front of a small plot of land. He wore a simple and practical clothing stained with dirt and a pair of sturdy boots. Gameon carefully avoided his crop, spoke with the farmer. His name is Blackman, and he would join the Liberation Army. The secret factory could be found a short distance north of Kalekka. At the factory, a couple of familiar faces emerged. "What you doing snooping around here? You better have a good reason, or this won't end well for you," a woman with tall, imposing, and muscular physique said. She would later be known as Ronnie Bell. The two familiar faces were Ledden and Kessler from Mount Tigerwolf. It seemed like they had been chased off the mountain, and now they are getting into trouble by offending Ronnie Bell. Hey, it is Ledden and Kessler. Gameon stepped in before things could get out of hand. The duo recognized Gameon, but he pretended that they were strangers. Eventually, Ronnie Bell got to know that Gameon was the leader of the Liberation Army and granted them access to the secret factory. Upon speaking with Ledden and Kessler, Gameon also got to know that the inn they operated at Mount Tigerwolf were attacked by the Imperial Army. With nowhere to go, Ledden and Kessler requested to join the Liberation Army. Inside, the factory's heart pulsed with industry. The main hall, dimly lit by flickering oil lamps, was a cavernous space filled with the clang of hammers and the roar of furnaces. Massive forges glowed red, casting jagged shadows across the stone floor, while anvils and workbenches cluttered the space, strewn with half-forged swords and arrowheads. The air was thick with the acrid tang of molten metal and sweat, a testament to the rebellion's tireless forging of weapons for the Liberation Army. Mose, clad in crimson red, a robust and weathered figure whose appearance reflects his life of labor and loyalty to the Liberation Army, stood in front of the forge. He gave great news that the factory had produced fire spears according to the blueprints provided by Odessa. Perhaps her parting gift would really turn the tide of war for the Liberation Army. With the fire spears secured, the team would then return to Kirov to find Taiho's friend Kun, as he had the fleet of boats required to transport the fire spears back to Ramyeon Castle. At the corner of the secret factory, Cage, the ninja who helped to deliver the blueprints, could be found. He did not have an active contract, and by offering him 20,000 poch, he would serve the Liberation Army till the end of the war. Back at Kirov, Gameon would first talk to a potential recruit who could be found southwest of town. Melodye was seeking for the sound orb. Gameon had the sound orb in hand. He found it at the house northeast of Kalekka. He would give Melodye the orb and she would join the Liberation Army, providing the service to change sound effects at Ramyeon Castle. Gameon then continued his mission to recruit Kuntu and seek his help to transport the fire spears. Kuntu was a wealthy and resourceful merchant from Kirov. He wore a long, elegant robe in green, adorned with subtle embroidery or patterns that hinted his prosperity without being ostentatious. He was a friend of Taiho and owed Taiho a favor. With some persuasion, Kuntu would join the Liberation Army and help them transport the fire spears to Ramyeon Castle. It was a fruitful day. Everything seemed to have fallen into place nicely. The secret factory had not been attacked by the Imperials. The fire spears were constructed according to plan. Kuntu provided the boats to transport a massive number of fire spears to Ramyeon Castle. New recruits had joined. Mose, Ronnie Bell, Cage, Melodye, and Kuntuo. Confidence returned to Gameon, and victory against his father was in sight. The boat sliced through the glassy waters of Lake Tehran, its prow cutting a gentle wake as Gameon stood at the helm. The fire spears, gleaming crates of rebel-forged weaponry stacked securely behind him. The dawn sky bled orange, casting a warm glow on his youthful face, now hardened by war. Ahead, Ramyeon Castle loomed, its gray stone towers rising from the lake's edge, banners of the Liberation Army fluttering defiantly. The boat's creak and the lapping waves mingled with the distant clang of the castle's forges, a beacon of hope as Gameon steered home. The fire spears a promise of victory against the Scarlet Moon Empire. The next morning, the time had arrived to face Teo McDohl again. Gameon went to the meeting chamber to order the attack. The battlefield stretched across the rolling plains south of Pannu, Yakuta, a sea of trampled grass under a sky bruised with storm clouds. The Liberation Army, 11,000 strong, faced the Scarlet Moon Empire's armored cavalry, 14,000 elite riders under General Teo McDohl, their steel-plated horses glinting like a tidal wave of iron. Gameon stood at the heart of his forces, the Soul Eater rune pulsing faintly on his hand. His green tunic mud-streaked, but his tonfa steady. Beside him, the fire spear's crates of blazing rune-forged lances crackled with latent power, their tips glowing red in the late afternoon light. Lepant, clad in gilded armor, raised his sword and roared, leading the first charge. His disciplined infantry surged forward, fire spears leveled. The ground shook as they clashed with Teo's vanguard, the spears erupting in bursts of flame that seared through armor and scattered horses in shrieking chaos. But the Imperial cavalry regrouped, their lances gleaming as they counterattacked with relentless precision. From the eastern flank, the bandits of Mount Sifu, led by the wild-eyed Varkas, launched the second charge. The spear's flames roared, engulfing swaths of cavalry in blistering columns. Horses reared, riders fell, and the Imperial line wavered as the bandits' ferocity tore through their ranks like a storm. Gameon, heart-pounding, signaled the third charge. He sprinted forward, staff raised. The fire spears in their hands blazed, trails of flame arcing through the air as they struck the cavalry's core. The rebels pushed deeper, their outnumbered ranks fueled by desperation and hope, until the cavalry's momentum faltered, their lines buckling under the relentless fire. As the Imperial troops teetered, Taiho, grinning fiercely, led the final charge from the western ridge. Taiho's spear blazed as he struck, flames erupting in a crescendo that engulfed Teo's rearguard. The cavalry, already frayed, broke apart, horses bolting and riders scattering across the bloody plain. Teo, isolated, fought on, his armor scorched but his resolve unyielding, until even he withdrew, his forces in disarray. Gameon faced his father after the Liberation Army's victory. Matthew stood by his side, said, "General Teo McDohl, your army has been defeated. Please, surrender yourself." But the Imperial officers were defiant and refused to surrender. Gameon McDohl, traitor against the Emperor Barbarossa, the most reviled criminal in the land. I, Teo McDohl, shall defeat you on behalf of His Majesty, the Emperor. Will you accept my challenge? Teo said. Gameon stood forward and accepted the challenge. This is a fight between an Imperial general and the commander of the Liberation Army. The dusk cast long shadows over the scarred plains near Pannu, Yakuta, where Gameon McDohl faced his father, General Teo McDohl, in a duel that silenced the weary Liberation Army onlookers. Teo, towering despite his wounds, gripped his bloodied sword, his once shining armor dented and scorched from the fire spear's wrath. His face, lined with pain and pride, betrayed faltering strength, his breaths labored. Gameon, heart heavy, stood opposite, staff raised, the Soul Eater rune glowing faintly on his hand, his resolve unbroken. The clash was swift. Teo's blade arced sluggishly, easily parried by Gameon's deft strikes. A single precise blow to Teo's chest sent the general staggering, his sword clattering to the earth. Teo fell to one knee, defeated, his eyes meeting Gameon's with a mix of sorrow and respect. Gameon McDohl, my son, you have grown so strong. I lived for what I believed in, and I have no regrets. You must also live for what you believe in. I congratulate you on your choice. Teo said, his life gradually fading. His loyalty to the Empire compelled him to fight against his son. However, he was also proud of his son, who was able to stand on his own and walked his own path. He then asked Alan and Glenshiel to join the Liberation Army. Teo fought for the Emperor, and his loyalty was with the Emperor, not Windy. He believed that the sands of time could not be stopped, and there was no need for Alan and Glenshiel to follow his footsteps. Gameon, my son, I am happy. The greatest happiness a father can experience is to see his son surpass him. Good luck, my son, Gameon. Teo McDohl drew his last breath. One of the 5 generals of the Imperial Army had fallen. Gameon's Soul Eater rune glowed as if Teo's soul was consumed by it. A cursed rune which gained power for every close friend or family of its wielder who had perished. After the victory against Teo McDohl, Lepin said that the Liberation Army had already liberated the South and the West. The Liberation Army's strength increases by the day, while insurgencies had broken out across the Empire upon hearing Teo McDohl's defeat. To quell the rebellion across the Empire, the Imperial Army were spread thin at the rural territories and left an opening at the Lorimar fortress. The Lorimar region would be poorly defended, and Gameon would order an assault at the fortress. At Lorimar Fortress, the Liberation Army faced no resistance at all. In fact, after Kasumi scouted ahead, the fortress was completely empty. As the army filed through the gates, the courtyard revealed a haunting scene. The cobblestone expanse was littered with abandoned crates and broken weapons, their edges dusted with frost. Along the walls, rows of graves stretched in grim order, their earth freshly disturbed mounds of dirt upturned, wooden markers splintered, and shallow pits gaping where bodies had been unearthed. The sight sent a shiver through the ranks. Victor muttered a curse under his breath. The grave's desecration spoke of something unnatural, a violation that hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint, acrid scent of decay. The wind howled through cracked windows, carrying whispers of Lorimar's dark secrets, perhaps tied to Necklord's sinister influence. Gameon's gaze lingered on the defiled graves outside, his resolve hardening. The fortress, abandoned yet alive with menace, was a puzzle the Liberation Army would need to unravel to press their rebellion forward. But before venturing further into the Lorimar region, Gameon would lead Taiho, Yamku, Kirkus, Cleo, and Victor to seek new allies. South of Kirov, through Turan Lake, hid a pirate's den. Anji, Leonardo, and Kanak were acquaintances of Taiho and would join the liberation. Army after Gameon and his squad could prove their strength to the pirates. The rickety pirate's den groaned under the clash of steel as Gameon's squad faced the pirate trio, Anji, Leonardo, and Kanak, beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. Waves slapped against the moored boats, their creaking hulls swaying as the fight erupted. Gameon, staff flashing, led the charge, the Soul Eater rune on his hand pulsing with dark energy. Cleo, fire rune aglow, stood at his flank, while Victor's greatsword swung wide. Taiho and Yamku's spears jabbed with precision, and Kirkus knocked arrows with elven grace. Leonardo, a hulking brute with a scarred face and curved blade, roared and lunged first. Gameon met him head-on, dodging a wild swing as the rune's shadowy tendrils lashed out, coiling around Leonardo's limbs. Cleo unleashed a torrent of fire, flames erupting across the pirate's leather vest, searing his flesh. He staggered, bellowing, only for Victor's blade to cleave through his guard, toppling him to the splintered planks. Anji, lean and snarling, darted forward, his dual daggers a blur. Taiho and Yamku countered, their spears thrusting in tandem, forcing him back. Kirkus loosed an arrow, grazing Anji's shoulder, but the pirate's ferocity held until Gameon's tonfas cracked against his skull. The Soul Eater's power drained his strength. Cleo's firebolt followed, engulfing Anji in a blaze that sent him crumpling, his daggers clattering into the water below. Kanak, the last, fought with desperate cunning, his trident jabbing at Victor's chest. But the mercenary parried, grinning, as Taiho's spear pierced Kanak's side. Kirkus's arrows pinned the pirate's movements, and Gameon closed in, the rune's dark pulse overwhelming Kanak's resolve. A final fire burst from Cleo consumed him, his trident falling as he sank to the dock, defeated. The pirates were convinced by Gameon's strength and would join the Liberation Army. This marks the end of the episode, and if you have enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks, and see you in the next one.